Hello and welcome to this video. In this video I'm going to be looking at building some of these 3D resin printed 1/76th scale Scorpion tanks that form part of Trains4u's Military models range, printed to complement their exclusive Cavalix war flat wagon. They also do these wheel scotches and also the ratchet straps to secure these vehicles to the wagons. Now these Scorpions are relatively new to the range, and their range of military vehicles is extensive. It really is worth having a look online, as these extremely competitively priced models build up into some fantastic models, and once painted they really do look superb. Here is a list of the military vehicles that are available. These are available to buy from the shop, online, or indeed from their stand when they attend model shows. So having a look inside the clear plastic bag of parts, there aren't that many parts to deal with, and it looks like it's going to be a relatively easy kit to put together. The turret is a separate moulding. There are two gun types to go on this, one with a stand and one without. You get two wing mirrors and the tracks and wheels, etc. And I've been reliably informed by John, the guy who prints these kits for the model shop, that all you need to do for assembly is to use some super glue, and the super glue does work extremely well with this type of resin. These models, having been printed in resin, have actually a surprising amount of weight to them. In their bare resin state, you can't really appreciate the level of detail on these models. That only becomes apparent once they've been primed. The turret piece here can either be left loose so that it swivels, or it can be fixed in place. I will be fixing mine in place, as I'll be loading these onto those war flat wagons. The wheels and tracks for the sides, these are a work of art. The detail on these and the tracks is really quite outstanding for a 3D printed model. The side tracks there will only go on one way. The cog mechanism goes towards the front, and there is a pin and hole assembly to make sure you get them orientated correctly. The gun barrel just simply pushes into the turret piece there, and then that fits in the hole, and then you put the wing mirrors on. So there's 8 pieces all told to this kit, and it builds up into a phenomenal little model. These wing mirrors here, these are cast with their printing pips on, as they're quite a delicate item, and these are fixed to the side. Now if you were having these on display in a battle setting, you'd have the wing mirrors out, but as mine are loaded onto wagons, mine will be folded in. Now, as I said, super glue works extremely well with this resin. You don't need a lot, just a couple of small dabs on the pip there and in the hole for the tracks, and then these are simply push fit. Just make sure they're correctly orientated. Hold it together for a few seconds to let the super glue bond, and then that's it. That will hold firm, and it did hold very, very strongly. You see, that was real time there, and that is already set. So once the tracks are on, I'm now going to put a small amount of glue onto the hole there where the barrel section goes, and I push this in, ensuring that it is straight and level, because this will have to sit straight and level on the Scorpion's bodywork for when it's loaded onto the wagon. Again, the super glue reacts very fast to this resin, so that's already stuck fast. And then I go to clip the wing mirrors off the printing pips there, and they come off in one piece like that. So that was actually quite good. The printing pips let go very easily. Now the only thing I did differently with the wing mirrors was I attached these with the super glue, as we did everything else, but I used some baking powder to accelerate the joint, because baking powder and super glue forms a chemical bond. And because these wing mirrors are actually quite fragile, I wanted them to be properly bonded together so that they weren't knocked off when the models were on the layout. So just using my tweezer nose pliers there with a small amount of super glue on, I just put this onto the spigot on the body side, allow it to bond, and then put put some baking powder on it to form that chemical bond, and that has actually solidified nicely and they'll be held in place. Last thing to go on is the turret and the gun barrel. So once I'm happy with the fit, again just 2 tiny spots of super glue either side of that lug, and then I'll line it up to make sure it's all square and then hold it in place, and then that is one of these Scorpion tanks built in 10 minutes, in less than 10 minutes in actual fact. It's a very enjoyable build, much easier than the old Airfix kit used to be, and we'll come back to that later on in the video. And I'll set that one aside to let the glue fully set, and we'll set about building the 2nd, 3rd and 4th tanks. Now whilst I slip into this time lapse here of me building these tanks, I would just like to extend my gratitude to John at Trains4u who prints these for giving me these tanks to feature in this video. I'm very grateful for him. They are fantastic models, and now that I've built the Scorpions, I'm going to have to invest in some of his Land Rovers. Now you'll see me there on this time lapse. I just opened the holes up on one of the models with a small 2mm drill bit just to make the fit a bit better. And on these last 3 models I did accelerate the super glue with the baking powder method just so that everything was chemically bonded and extremely strong. There really is no need for it, it's just my preferred method of working with super glue and models like this. So there in that time lapse, what you've seen there is probably 25 minutes work to build all 4 of the tanks. And like I said, there are 2 gun types you can use. I opted for the gun type with the bracket on both of them. And there are all 4 completed. Now the tank second from right there, I'm going to zoom in a minute. The gun barrel was actually drooping downwards. Now I think this may have been a bit of a printing error, but because of the resin is so easy to work with, I actually just cut that off and used a spare gun barrel off that comes with these kits, and then a small amount of super glue just to replace the gun there. Hold it in place for a few seconds and it was on. Because the super glue reacts so well with the resin, a straight gun now and a truly solid bond, and that gun is not going to go anywhere. So let's take a look at the tanks now. We'll put them on this Cavalax Models War Flat wagon, which again is exclusive to Trains4u in Peterborough, and again is another phenomenal model to add to your collection if you model this type of era. And 2 tanks can fit on 1 flat. Now these resin printed wheel scotches, these will need painting, and they sit under the treads there, and that is an extremely good level of detail, as these tanks in real life would have been scotched like that whilst on the wagons on the move. So all the wheel scotches and tanks were primed with Halford's grey primer, just normal acrylic primer. This is my primer of choice for all my resprays. And I also have to prime and paint all these wheel scotches. Now, as if by magic, we will now go to the tanks primed. And as I mentioned earlier, now the level of detail really does stand out on these models. The treads there and the tank tracks, there's detail on the tank sides with various tools. The exhaust outlet there with its metal grille. The detail on top of the turret, the toolboxes on the back. There are ratchet strap holders, the headlights. The level of detail is, you're never going to get this amount of detail on the very old, and to be quite honest, very expensive now, Airfix kit. These Scorpion tanks really do look nice, and as you saw earlier, they do a wide range of tanks, and they all carry this same level of detail. The easiest way I found to paint and indeed prime the wheel scotches was to line them all up on some double-sided tape and then spray the primer. And I'd actually run out of orange spray, so I then hand painted them all orange with some Tamiya acrylic orange paint. So now that everything's primed, it's over to the paint shop and we're going to apply some colour to these models. Now I'm not going to lie, painting is probably my least favourite thing about kit building. But with these tanks it was actually quite therapeutic, and again was relatively easy because the Tamiya paints I use dry relatively quick. So here we're just taking a last look at a tank in primer, and in true Blue Peter style, here's one I made earlier. Here's a fully painted Scorpion tank that took me about 30 minutes to paint because, like I said, the acrylic dries pretty quick. Now the two paints I've used on this model are Tamiya XF67 NATO Green and Tamiya, I believe it's XF69 NATO Black. The other paints, brown and silvers, are just acrylics I had in my paint tub. But how does that look now that's been painted? That looks absolutely brilliant. Now I'm not sure if there's an exact science to camo painting. Oh, I just showed you the underside. I didn't bother painting the underside because obviously you're not going to see it. But as I was saying, I don't know if there's a science behind camouflage painting of tanks or whether there's a standard that the military adhere to, but I just tend to do it random, checking online for prototype pictures. But I think in my eye, your number one rule applies to your models. If it looks good and it looks right, it most probably is. So I'm not going to bore you with hours of footage of me hand painting the models. I just used a number 0 brush and I painted them in batches. So I painted the NATO Black first and then the NATO Green. And like I said, it took me about 20 minutes to paint each tank. And here we have, just for comparison, the one I did first. So after about an hour, I've got 3 painted tanks with the green and the black and the orange scotches. But for the 4th tank, I wanted to do something different. Now, I do like the tanks in this colour, and I think they look rather smart. And there's some brake light, tail lights on the back of the tank there. But as I was saying, I wanted something different. So the 4th tank, I actually painted white and did snow camouflage. Now this was just normal acrylic white with the NATO Black. And I did a quick Google search to see if any Scorpions carried this, and I found this image of a Scorpion tank. It may not be the exact model I've got in my hand, but I think this white and black looks very smart. So it was acrylic white, NATO Black, and then the black had rail match satin black lining added. And it just adds a bit of variety to the military train that I'm going to be running on my layout. The only difference I would have done if I'd have known I was going to do this colour scheme was I would have painted the white tank. I would have used white primer. So now it's the following evening and we're going to mount the tanks onto the wagons. Now to do this, obviously you'll need your wagon and the ratchet straps that come with the kit. Now the ratchet straps themselves are quite long, so I cut mine in half, doubling obviously the amount I had, and I've got some in my spares box now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a ratchet strap and my Loctite super glue. Apply a very small amount of super glue to the end of one of the straps. And then apply it to the model underneath the headlight there. So just hold that in place and let the glue grab onto the resin. And then that was left to set, and then I put one on the other side. And also I put 2 on the back. So I'm just going to use a cocktail stick there just to manipulate that slightly before the glue completely hardens. And there's the second one going on. So they form a cross, they form a cross section on the front of the tank. To fix the tanks to the wagon deck, I'm just going to use this cheap craft PVA glue, and I just use a cocktail stick to smother a very small amount of glue on the underside of the tracks. This just keeps the tanks in place nicely on the wagon, and the PVA glue bond is easily broken in future should you want to remove the tanks from the wagons. So being PVA glue, this takes a while to dry, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to position the tank on the bed of the wagon. And another benefit of being PVA is it gives you time to manipulate them into the correct position. And again, in Blue Peter style, here's one I did earlier. Now this wagon has got the 2 NATO tanks on it, and I've also put the wheel scotches on. The ratchet straps have all been done, and the PVA glue is thoroughly dry. Now this one was done the day before, and I'll just lift the wagon up now, and you can see that the PVA glue does hold those tanks to the wagon nice and securely, so they're not going anywhere. So this wagon is all but complete now, and you can see the ratchet straps also go through that metal loop on the wagon end. So I'm now going to show you how I did the scotches and the straps. Starting with the scotches, I just hold them in my tweezer nose pliers and I use this very small amount of super glue again. And then once I've decanted some super glue onto the underside, using the tweezers, I then just gently push them underneath the tank tracks until they're wedged in between the tank and the wagon. Release the tweezers and the scotch will stay there, the glue will harden, and that is that in place. Now, I found with Loctite super glue it doesn't leave that nasty white bloom that cheap versions do. And the same was repeated with all the scotches around all 4 of the tanks. And one good thing, out of 2 packets of scotches, I was left with some spares, so I'll use these in the future on other models. Now the ratchet strap, I put through that hoop on the end there with the aid of my tweezer nose pliers, pulled it tight with finger pressure, and then using a cocktail stick with some super glue on it, I just smear a very small amount of super glue on the inside of that cardboard ratchet strap, and then using these tweezer pliers, squeeze the 2 pieces together so that the glue bonds, and then once the glue is bonded, I release the tweezers or the pliers and then let it fully set, and I will trim that up later on. To fix the rear of the tank to the wagon, I'm just going to put a little bit of super glue on that hook moulding that's in the base of the wagon, and then with a clean cocktail stick hold the ratchet strap on until the glue bonds, and this will only take a few seconds. So once everything's been done and left to fully dry for about half an hour, I just take some very small scissors, trim the ratchet straps up on the front of the model, and then the ones on the wagon deck, I used a scalpel just to cut the edge of the strap there, and typical, I've got my finger in the way so you can't actually see me doing it. But work gently, cut through the cardboard. That is the ratchet straps glued in place and cut to length, and they do look rather smart. And that is basically the build of the Trains4u Military Scorpion tanks, all but complete. And I hope you'll agree they do look a fantastic model, especially when mounted to these war flat wagons. I have built a number of the Airfix kits in the past, but these new models, these 3D resin printed ones, knock it into a cocked hat. There was the spare wheel scotches I was just showing there. So now I've moved the wagons over to the layout, the snow camo tank and the NATO wagon. They're all thoroughly cured now, thoroughly dry. And I really do like this white colour scheme on this Snow Scorpion. It really does. I don't know why, but I just really like that. And here's the other one with the other 2 NATO green tanks mounted on it. So I'm going to give these a spin around the layout with my 58. Now, all sorts of traction hauled military trains, and the 58 was just the one I had to hand, so we'll get that out in a minute. But as I mentioned earlier, we were going to come back to this. As a note of comparison, here is my original war flat with the Airfix Scorpions on it. Now I've built these resin ones. These Airfix ones really do look quite naff. So I am going to eventually replace all of my Scorpions with these resin 3D printed ones. I will keep the Airfix ones. I'll use those as background in the military depot or something. But you can just see the level of detail on the resin printed ones against those Airfix ones. So we'll get those out the way for a minute. So here's my military train behind a 58. First 2 wagons are the Cavalex war flats with the resin tanks, followed by 3 more war flats with Airfix, and then you've got a couple of Hatton's war wells with an aircraft refueler and a Bedford TK truck. So there we have it, the Trains4u Military 3D resin printed Scorpion tanks in 1/76 scale. Built, painted and mounted on wagons within a couple of days. Very nice couple of evenings work, especially this time of year with the nights drawing in and the weather's pretty rubbish. And again, there's no comparison to those Airfix ones. They sell for quite a lot of money now on eBay, and these Scorpion tanks, they are exceptional value for money. I'll leave links in the description for Trains4u's website. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.